Have you ever imagined that on the very day of my husband's funeral, a man I shared over 40 years of my life with, when everything should have been drenched in tears and sorrow, it instead turned into the most humiliating moment of my existence? My name is Margaret Collins. I'm 67 years old, living in the suburbs of Dallas, Texas. All my life, I sacrificed everything for my family, working tirelessly, saving every dime to build, together with my husband, a modest 2-story house filled with precious memories. Yet on the day I laid him to rest, I didn't just lose my lifelong partner. I was betrayed by my own daughter-in-law, Vanessa, not with a blade of steel, but with the cold sting of legal papers. Imagine this. In front of neighbors, friends, and relatives, Vanessa ripped my dignity apart when she threw a stack of court documents in my face and spat out her venomous words. "Mrs. Collins, this house doesn't belong to you anymore. It's mine now." The entire funeral parlor fell silent. I stood frozen, my hands trembling, my heart squeezed as if by an iron fist. The pitying stares, the hushed whispers, every sound pressed down on me like a crushing weight. And just when I thought I had lost everything, I uncovered a secret my husband had left behind, a secret powerful enough to turn the tide and transform my grief into the fire of revenge. I once thought losing my husband would be the worst pain of my life, but I was wrong. There was something far more devastating. When the very people you call family, your own flesh and blood, turn their backs, betray you, and try to steal everything you have. After the funeral, the house felt colder than ever. The family photos on the walls seemed to stare back at me with sorrowful eyes. I walked through each room, brushing my hands over the old belongings my husband had left behind, desperately searching for a trace of warmth. But before I could even begin to heal, Vanessa showed up with a young lawyer at her side. She stood in the middle of my living room, her high heels striking the wooden floor like hammers pounding against my heart. "You'd better move out soon. This house belongs to me and Daniel now," she said coldly. I turned to look at my son, Daniel, the boy I had raised and cared for over 40 years. But he kept his head down, unable to meet my eyes. My heart bled. That night, I sat alone in the garage. Tears fell, soaking the court papers in my hands. I collapsed, convinced it was all over. But then, in the shadows, I noticed an old wooden box my husband had always kept locked away. I opened it, and inside, between stacks of yellowed letters, was a life insurance policy he had secretly purchased years ago. The payout was enough to pull me back from the edge, enough to protect our home. For the first time, my heart flickered with hope. But that hope was quickly crushed when I discovered Vanessa had already known about it. She had a connection with a bank employee and had been quietly scheming to block the money. I felt cornered. But this time, instead of crying, I clenched my fists. I realized if I stayed silent, I would lose everything. If I endured, I would be buried in shame. I had to fight back. The next day, I reached out to someone I never imagined would come to my aid. Jessica Miller, a young attorney who had once been my student back when I was a high school teacher. As I poured out my story, her eyes burned with determination. "Mrs. Collins, you're not alone. I'll help you fight this to the very end." Her words were like medicine reviving my spirit, and that's when the real battle began. Vanessa was not easy to confront. She even dared to show up at my doorstep, taunting me, smirking in my face, as if I were just some weak old woman. But I knew, this time, I was no longer a victim. I would rise, and I would make her see, never underestimate a woman who has lost everything, because it's in the depths of despair that she discovers her greatest strength. In the days that followed, Jessica and I were thrown into a battle that felt hopelessly one-sided. Vanessa had money, connections, and even hired a prestigious Dallas law firm to fight against us. All I had was fragile faith and the memory of my late husband. But Jessica was different. She was young, relentless, and far more determined than I ever expected. We spent countless hours in my small living room, the old wooden table transformed into a makeshift law office. Papers, files, and receipts piled high. Jessica leaned forward and said, "Mrs. Collins, the key is proving that Vanessa forced Daniel to sign the loan agreement when he wasn't in a sound state of mind. If we can do that, everything will change." I nodded, though my heart was in turmoil. My son, my Daniel, had in fact signed those papers. But I knew it wasn't his choice. Vanessa was cunning. She always knew how to exploit her husband's weaknesses. One evening, Jessica brought me an audio recording she'd obtained through a friend who worked in the restaurant industry. On it, Vanessa's voice was crystal clear. "Just sign it, Daniel. It's only paperwork, nothing serious. I'll handle everything. All you need to do is finish this drink and stop worrying." When I heard it, my whole body went weak. My heart ached with grief and burned with rage. My son, the boy I had raised, had been turned into a puppet, manipulated by a greedy wife. I wanted to scream, to confront Daniel face to face, but Jessica stopped me. "Please, be patient. We need the right moment to bring everything into the light." The waiting was agonizing. Vanessa kept pressing harder. She didn't just send letters from her lawyers. She sent people to my door to intimidate me. Once, I opened the door to find an envelope on the porch. Inside was a photo of my house with a scrawled message. "Soon, you'll lose everything." I trembled, but this time, it wasn't fear. It was fury. A fire blazed inside me, stronger than ever before. I swore I would never let Vanessa destroy my life again. Meanwhile, Jessica began assembling the legal case. She reached out to witnesses, the neighbors who had overheard Vanessa and Daniel fighting, the waiter who saw Daniel stumbling drunk when he signed the papers. Piece by piece, the fragments came together, forming a picture of the truth. I'll never forget one particular evening. The two of us sat in my small kitchen, the soft yellow light spilling over stacks of heavy documents. Jessica smiled, her voice steady and firm. "The hearing is coming soon, Mrs. Collins. I need you to be ready. There will be painful moments, but it will also be the time when the truth is finally revealed." I looked at her, this young woman who had once been my student, and felt a strange warmth rise inside me. In the darkness of betrayal, there was still a light of hope, and I knew the real battle was only just beginning. The first day of the hearing finally arrived. That morning, the Dallas sky was dark and heavy, storm clouds looming like a warning of what was to come. My legs trembled as I walked into the courthouse, but inside me burned an unshakable resolve. Across the room, Vanessa swept in wearing an expensive dress, her glossy curls bouncing as she flashed a smug smile. She dragged Daniel along like a lifeless doll. His eyes were vacant, unable to meet mine. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. Vanessa's attorney opened with a grandiose speech, painting her as a responsible daughter-in-law who had taken on the family's burdens, while portraying me as a stubborn old woman, clinging selfishly to everything. Each word cut into me like a knife. I could hear whispers ripple through the gallery, neighbors I had known for years now, staring at me with doubt in their eyes. When it was Jessica's turn, I watched her draw a deep breath before rising to her feet. Her voice rang out strong and steady. "Your Honor, this is not a story of sacrifice, it is a story of deliberate deceit. We will prove that the contract in question was signed under coercion and unfair circumstances." Then, she presented the audio recording. Vanessa's syrupy voice oozed from the small speaker, every word dripping with manipulation. "Just sign it, Daniel. It's only paperwork, nothing serious. I'll handle everything. All you need to do is finish this drink and stop worrying." For a fleeting second, I saw Vanessa's face pale, but she quickly regained composure, stealing a glance at her attorney, as if to signal she was ready with a counterattack. "That was nothing more than playful banter between husband and wife," her lawyer shot back. "One isolated conversation cannot possibly invalidate the legality of this contract." My chest tightened. It felt as if the truth itself was being twisted into a mockery. But Jessica stood firm. She requested the court to hear from a witness, a middle-aged waiter from the restaurant where the contract was signed. The man's hands shook as he testified. Daniel had been so drunk that night he could barely stand, and it was Vanessa who paid for the endless rounds of liquor and then pressed the pen into his hand. The courtroom fell silent. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Vanessa bit down on her lip, her glare slicing toward the witness. But what pierced me most was not her anger, it was the defeated look on Daniel's face. My son sat with his hands clasped tightly, sweat glistening on his forehead, looking like a child caught in the eye of a storm, with no place to run. During the recess, as I passed by, Vanessa suddenly leaned close and hissed in my ear, her voice low but venomous. "You really think you can win, Margaret? This court? This city? They're all in my hands." For the first time, I didn't flinch. I met her eyes head-on. In that instant, I realized I had changed. I was no longer the trembling widow at a funeral. I had become a mother ready to fight to the very end to defend her home. That day closed in tension. The judge ruled to continue the hearing, calling for more witnesses and additional evidence. As we walked out of the courthouse, Jessica turned to me and said, "This is only the beginning. Be ready, because the real turning point is still ahead." I lifted my eyes toward the Dallas sky. The clouds still hung heavy, but inside me, a faint light flickered to life. I knew the storm was far from over. But this time, I would not face it alone. The days leading up to the next hearing were a blur of tension and vigilance. Every time I stepped outside, I felt as if unseen eyes were tracking my every move. And then one evening, as I returned home, I found another envelope waiting at my door. Inside was a photo of me sitting with Jessica at a cafe, along with a scrawled message. "Stop wasting your time, old lady. The law won't be on your side." I clenched the photo in my fist, anger rising inside me like a crashing wave. But this time, instead of fear, I felt a resolve stronger than ever. I handed the picture to Jessica. She frowned, tapping her pen against the table. "Vanessa's playing mind games, trying to scare you into giving up," she said. "But you're not alone. We're going to hit back." In the days that followed, Jessica and I dug for more evidence. She reached out to a bank employee who had stumbled across my late husband's life insurance policy. He revealed that someone had deliberately interfered to delay the payout. It was a crucial piece of the puzzle, confirming that Vanessa hadn't just rigged the loan contract, she was trying to steal the insurance money too. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I walked the hallway, my hand brushing over the framed family photos. In each picture, my husband smiled gently, and Daniel was still that bright-eyed little boy. I asked myself what had turned my son into a man so weak, so willing to let his wife manipulate him. My heart ached, but at the same time I whispered a promise. "No matter how fragile you've become, my son, I'll protect this home for you." The second hearing opened under an even heavier atmosphere. This time, Jessica carried a thicker file and brought two new witnesses, a longtime neighbor and the bank employee. The neighbor testified that she had repeatedly overheard Vanessa yelling at Daniel, forcing him to sign papers. The bank employee told the court under oath that a woman named Vanessa Collins had personally called him, applying pressure to block the insurance payout. Vanessa shot to her feet, screaming, "That's a lie, a smear campaign." The judge banged the gavel for order, but the courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Daniel sat beside her, head bowed, hands trembling. For the first time, I caught a flicker of regret on my son's face. Jessica stepped forward, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "Your Honor, this is no longer just a simple civil dispute. This is a systematic attempt to seize assets through deceit." The entire room fell silent. I looked at Vanessa, her once cold face now twisted with rage. But in her eyes I saw something else too. Fear. As we left the courthouse that day, Jessica leaned close and whispered, "Mrs. Collins, we're closing in. But be ready, Vanessa will play her final card. And it's going to be more ruthless than anything you've seen." I drew a deep breath, standing beneath the gusty Dallas sky. I knew this battle was far from over. The real storm still lay ahead, threatening to swallow me whole. But I had made my choice no matter what. I would not back down. The final hearing was set for a Monday morning. I hadn't slept a wink all weekend. In the quiet of the house, the clock's ticking felt like knives chipping away at my patience. I knew this would be the decisive battle. Either I would keep the home my husband left me, or I'd lose everything. That morning I put on a simple black dress, not to look weak, but to remind myself that I was still in mourning for an honest, decent man, a husband who'd spent his life protecting our family. When I walked into the courthouse, Vanessa was already there. She sat in the front row in a white blazer, her makeup perfect down to every line. A smug, challenging smile played on her lips. Daniel sat beside his wife, but something was different. He looked worn out, hollow-eyed, and constantly avoiding my gaze. It tore at me. He was no longer the strong son I had raised. He was a man lost in the arms of his puppeteer. The hearing began. Vanessa's lawyers launched into rapid-fire arguments, claiming I couldn't pay the debt, accusing me of inventing stories to cling to the property. They painted me as a stubborn, selfish old woman. Each sentence felt like another wave trying to drown me in shame. I scanned the room. A few people nodded at their words. Others eyed me with suspicion. My chest tightened. Then Jessica stood up. She was unnervingly calm, her eyes blazing with purpose. "Your Honor," she said, "we've uncovered new evidence. one final piece that proves the whole truth. Vanessa raised an eyebrow, but I watched her fingers clench without meaning to. Jessica held up a small USB drive and plugged it into the courtroom's projector. The room fell silent. On the screen, security footage from the bank played. There was Vanessa, in a striking red dress, arguing aggressively with an employee. The audio came through, clear as day. "If you even think about transferring that insurance money to that old witch, I'll make sure you lose your job. Got it?" The courtroom erupted. Whispers swelled into a roar. Vanessa went pale, then jumped up, shouting, "This is fabricated! It's a frame job!" But I knew, in that instant, her mask had cracked. I looked at Daniel Head, bowed, hands trembling, tears carving tracks down his face. The judge slammed his gavel for order, then said in a measured voice, "This evidence will be examined thoroughly, but it plainly indicates unlawful interference with the insurance proceeds." I gripped Jessica's hand. For the first time in months, real hope rose in me. Still, I understood the fight wasn't over. Vanessa wasn't someone who bowed easily. During a recess, she brushed past me, her eyes sharp as knives. In a low hiss I could barely hear, she whispered, "You think you've won? I still have one last card, and you will pay." I shivered, but the fear was gone. I could feel the darkness lifting, and the light of justice drawing near. Yet I also knew, before that light fully breaks through, one more violent storm was coming.